Hey everybody, welcome back. It's I, DrBossKey, and today we are going to walk through how we set up basically a difficulty selection system for our game. We just added this today, so I think it's pretty well bulletproof at this point. I did some testing, did some scripting, so yeah, so let me just show you how it works. So we're in order to check score and level transitions, you need to be in the actual game, your compiled game, not the editor. You can check because you won't load between levels. So you load into basically an empty level in this case. You got a dialogue here, which I've set up as an enemy. So choose your difficulty. And then I have 4 difficulty levels. And then the difficulty levels, the main knob we have to turn is the amount of lives you have as a player. So otherwise, you can in the editor change the amount of continues you have, but you can't change those dynamically. So we've now set our lives to essentially 1, and then we let the player take a look at these. So casual, you get 30 lives. Everyone gets 3 continues. And then I thought I'd throw some bonus score in here as well. So if you play on hard or heroic level, essentially, then you're going to get more points to help you in your, for hunting that overall, to biggest score possible. So, so we shoot here, and she disappears. We give you the lives like we said we would, so you get your bonus ships, and then we do a little score transition here since we're calling out score. I thought it's appropriate. And then on to the next level we go through. So yeah, that's the gist of it. So we can go back to menu real quick. Go back on through. Choose your difficulty. So we'll do casual this time. All right, and that's that. Okay, cool. So let's jump into how we set that up, right? All right. Let's see here. Let's turn on some other music. Yeah, cool. Okay, so here's the level setup. Switch to perspective. There we go. All right. Okay, so got a couple things going on here. Let me turn this down a little bit. Double check my audio levels, because everything's super exciting. 1 2 1 2 should be fine. Actually, let me turn it down a little bit. I mean, as much as we're on jam. Okay, cool. So a couple pro tips out there for you. If you're doing level logic, I mentioned this before, but it's always good to point it out again. You can come in to your to the way you set up your gameplay logic, right? And you can basically add a trigger, and the trigger is set for the player to go into the zone. You can always put it outside of your play field area, and then you put a little text here. So a little text element, and you just leave the text element set to default. And this gives you your basically hints as to how you set things up. So in this case, it's so what we do here is we set up the initial dialogue, and we spawn the difficulty choices, right? So basically what it is we have our first dialogue here, which you can see here, which is the choose your difficulty, and then from there this trigger is here, and so when the triggers the trigger triggers when the connected enemy state is all dead. So that's just that first dialogue. And then we spawn each of the difficulty dialogue options here. These are just enemies in the engine. I kind of like the interaction with being able to shoot dialogues because you have a little bit more control over timing, pacing, and triggers. You can set these up in different ways, but this is the way I wound up doing it. It kind of works for my game. So, okay. So yeah, so then the next thing that we do is now that the dialogues, so this is basically showing this, right? So then all the dialogue spawn, which we just went through. And then from there, the next thing that happens is we have some logic here, which is essentially a trigger. And this trigger is set to, take a look here. All right, cool. Yeah, so on that main dialogue, we have a trigger then that triggers. That's what it is. Okay, cool. So so this is the normal mode, and so what we did is we needed to set up for each of the enemies. We set up basically when the enemy dies. So when the when the trigger set to any connected enemy state is all dead. Then we have an item spawner. The item spawner spawns what we call our soul key. This one moves, means it moves towards the player in this case. And then this is how we award the player lives. So I have basically here in the item side of things, I have these soul keys, and these are just one of the things we use for extra lives. So, and so there you can take a look here on the soul key. So it's just set to as an item, and it's a 1-up power up, right? And so for every one of the dialogues, because that's how we control difficulty, is how many lives you have now, then we award different levels of soul keys. The other thing to take a look at while we're on the subject of this here is game settings. Is it game settings? No, it's I think it's in player. I always forget where it's at. 1 second. All right, so yeah, so over here on the player and on the gameplay object, let's see, is that there? No, it must be. I always get confused between the health points and then the game options. So yeah, we're probably gameplay. All right, gameplay. There we go. Is that it? Mm-hmm. All right, where did I put it? Let's see here. So that's the continues. All right, so maybe it was on the player ship. Maybe I missed it. Back over to take a look. It's in there somewhere. We just got to find it. All right, so it's health points. Ah, here we go. I just missed it. Yeah, so here we have lives, right? This is the number of lives when the game starts. So you can't set it to, you can only set it to 1 right now. I have a suggestion to Sunny about being able to set it to 0, so you only have your 1 life. But this also shows when you see up here, this is your life meter, right? Okay, so and in order to control difficulty, that's what we do. So you can also set your continues if you want and whatnot, but you can't set your continues at runtime. Okay, so then that is how we control the difficulty. We basically spawn items that fly into the player ship, right? So I move stuff around here temporarily, but just to show it again. Then you can see the keys, and that gives us our lives. So the normal difficulty was set to 5 lives, and so we're actually fudging it a bit by setting it to 4 because right now it's 5 total. Okay, so we went through and we added that for, okay, so we did that for each of the other 2 dialogues. We don't have any lives awarded for the heroic. And then the next thing we do is on death spawn, we spawn a weapon stripper, which basically means that we take away the player's weapons and set it to no weapons. And then we also create what I call an enemy bullet blocker. I'll tell you what that is in a second. And then we end the level. So that's the last piece of the logic here. And so that's the trigger here is that, so this trigger is connected to all of the enemy types. So what we want to have happen is when you kill any one of these dialogues by making your selection, then we want this logic to trigger. And so then what happens is, yeah, so we got this. So we get and we have a countdown. So a countdown timer, which is 5 seconds. So you get a little time to have everything fly into your ship. And then we do the end level trigger there. And there's one other piece here. What is this? 2. Okay. Okay, so we do 2 other things that are a bit interesting here. So here's the problem we ran into, right? So the problem you run into is when you kill an enemy type, I only want to select 1 dialogue, right? And in order to select 1 dialogue and not let the player kill all the other players, now you could possibly get in a situation where with your weapons you can kill more than 1 enemy. There's some ways to work around that, but here's the best way we found to lock it down for now. So when the player kills one enemy type, then you can see that I can no longer shoot. So shooting is taken away. And also probably the other thing that's important is if I do it from afar. So you'll see when this dies that I have a little bit of shooting, just a few more bullets left, and then basically they hit collision, and are not able to shoot the other enemies. Okay, so the way we did this. So when we go into our final sequence, which is this this trigger, right? That basically when any of the enemies die, we then have basically an enemy type here, which we call block P bullet. So that's just player bullet. And you'll see here, so here you can see when I'm moving it around, you can see the collision for that. And so all this is we spawn basically an enemy, and this enemy is set to have collision with player bullets, and we set the enemy to be invincible. So this means that bullets, now if you have a bullet that passes through, like I do in this case, this won't work 100% for you. But for blocking normal bullets that are, this will work for you. So, and the intent of this is that this enemy spawns and it starts blocking player bullets. So technically you can be inside the blocking space, and if you're on top of these enemies inside of them, you can actually still do damage. But this, for the most part, catches most of the scenarios. And then so the other thing that we do, and you can tell here, so all we did is we basically created, we took a, like this is a 64 by 64 resolution sprite, and then we essentially just scaled it up to like 1000. So that way we have the collision for it. Okay, so that's one piece. So this is a little bit of cork on the fork. And then the other thing that we do is, so that's that one there is, right, that's right. Okay, let's find this. Lots of things. Okay. Okay, here it is. So, all right, cool. So the other thing, so in addition to spawning that big enemy that blocks bullets, is we also have an item spawner. So this item spawner essentially spawns what we call our weapon spreader, our weapon stripper. So what we did is we created an item, and this item is giant in this case. And unfortunately, I had to do this with a large texture. It's a 2048 by 2048 in this case. But the idea is that it spawns right on top of the play field, and it almost immediately goes into the player's ship. And so here, we set it to score 0, and then we set the player's weapon set to set 14, which, if you look at the player enemy, the player weapons. So I have these weapon sets, and then down here, you could be any set you want, but I have basically, I switch the player to set 14 empty, and then that doesn't have any weapons in it. So this basically stops the player from being able to use weapons, because again, we don't want to have the player kill all these dialogues and then get too many lives and all the bonuses, right? So all these dialogue enemies. And then that's it. So we, as a recap, right? We basically have the logic that essentially when you kill the first dialogue, it spawns 4 enemy dialogues. Those 4 enemy dialogues then are, when one of them's killed, it basically creates this player, or this enemy type with collision large to block into the player bullets, and then we spawn basically the item that then sets the player weapon sets to 0 to nothing, set 14 in our case. And then the other thing is that we have a little bit of logic that depending on which one you kill, we give the player what we said we'd give them. So and that just gives them score, because we want to give them some bonus score. We set the hit points for each of the dialogues to 300, because we won't want people to kill the dialogues immediately. So it's almost like a push to hold, if you will, in a modern development cycle. We give them some collection star bits, because this is the first thing the players encounter. So I wanted to leave the UI up. I wanted them to be able to see kind of like how the game works in a no pressure situation, right? So you can see that here. So for instance, that's why we have essentially the multiplier up and the score, the lives, so then the player can get a sense for what's going on. So when they kill an enemy, they see these green things fly into their ship, which gives them a bit of score itself, of course. They see their super meter grows a little bit, but more importantly, they see their lives. And then when we in level, we show the level score in that case. Yeah, so that's it. I know it seems a little bit complicated. It's not super complicated, but you can kind of follow through with the, maybe I'll do that here. I'll do just one last thing. It's just to simplify this. Let me go. And because I made a bunch of changes, I don't want to save those, so I just closed and reopened it. Okay. So, all right. Let's go to perspective mode. All right. So, this is the setup. All right. So, here is the setup. All right. First, we start with the enemy trigger. Stays active. Connected enemy state is all dead. This connects to the first dialogue choice, which is an enemy. That enemy is set to 300 hit points. No score because we didn't want any of that. It only collides with player bullets. No player damage. No collision damage because we didn't want people to go into the collision volumes for the enemies and die. And then once this enemy is destroyed, we spawn these 4 dialogue enemies. They're all set to the same thing here. Now when the player kills any one of these players, one of these enemies, basically we have an item spawner which gives you your lives, and we also then spawn we start that when any one of these enemies is killed out of the 4, we start the end sequence, which gives us a countdown timer of 5 seconds in our case. And then there's the end level. It takes you to the next level, shows the scores. And then we also spawn this blocking player bullet enemy type. And we spawn this item as well, which is the weapon stripper invisible. And to bring those back up so you guys can see those real quick. So here is, we already saw that one. So, all right. We basically have an item, which is getting spawned, and that item sets how many 1-ups you want to have, player level ups. And then inside of the gift box, we set the number of lives that the player should get. So just like what we tell them on the dialogues. Okay, so I hope that's helpful to give you a quick run through of where we're at. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.